G'day to you peeps, my name is Scripps, and welcome back to another speed paint. This time around we're doing something that probably none of you guys have ever seen before, which is a speed paint where I will be drawing creatures from Japanese folklore, also known as Japanese yokai. Yokai meaning ghosts, creatures, and anything monster or mythical from Japanese mythology. But just in case there actually happens to be an OG out there who says, wait, I remember seeing that, you did that a long time ago, then you get absolute bragging rights in the comments because yes, I've done this sort of challenge before. I did a series back in the day, way back in the day when the channel was still in its very infancy, where I drew creatures from different folklore from around the world. That including Japanese and also Celtic, and I think I did a bunch of others, but I don't really remember that, it's so long ago. But I'm returning to this challenge because since then I've gathered a lot of knowledge, not just about the Japanese world, the Japanese culture, but I've also learned a lot more about the whole drawing thing. So you know what, I'm gonna take a second shot at this, which is probably the first for most of you people, and I will be drawing my top 3 most creepy Japanese yokai that I've been able to find that I haven't done already. But anyway, let's kick off this challenge by doing an actual yokai, an actual Japanese ghost called the Yuki Onna, or the Snow Lady. You'll be probably hearing the word Onna a lot when you look up Japanese mythology, because there's so many mythologies just related to women, apparently. There's just a lot of, I don't know if people were suspicious of women back in ancient Japan, I don't know, but there's so many different women. Of course, there's the Yuki Onna, which we have right here. There's the Fuki something Onna, which is like a lady that has a mouth on the back of her head. There's some other Onna, which is like a long-necked lady, and then there's also like a snake lady. In more modern Japanese culture, there's like the Kuchikaze Onna, or like the wind mouth lady. And then of course there's the more widely spread like Kitsune Onna, which is like the nine-tailed fox lady, with like the lady who can transform and turn into a fox. We all know about that story. There's a bunch of Pokemon inspired by it. Let's actually talk about the one that I've picked, which is the Yuki Onna. As it goes with mythology, however, then it's pretty hard to track down the original story and where exactly this originated from. All we pretty much know is that this has been a recurring character in a lot of stories and a lot of poems throughout all of Japanese history, all the way back to the olden times. But that also means that visually she's been depicted very differently. Some have depicted the Snow Lady as this weak mother figure that clutches a baby and desperately wants you to hold it, but if you actually receive the baby and hold it, she'll freeze you on the spot and eat you. And others have just depicted her as this beautiful spiritual lady who has married normal people and just been their wife and had their children, but as soon as they went into bathwater, they melted away and just became snowflakes. However, as is a very recurring theme in different yokai stories, then most of the stories about the Yuki Onna is about deception. It's about this lady that will somehow trick you and deceive you, and then she will show her true appearance, and then she will kill mostly men. Women aren't mentioned a lot, mostly men. And well, of course, kids, because pretty much every yokai in every Japanese story ever somehow includes the motivation to steal kids. I don't know why, maybe they just really wanted to scare their children straight, I don't know, but they were certainly assholes, and therefore most Japanese yokai, they just apparently hate or love children a little too much. But since the reoccurring description of this lady were so vague and they changed so much, then the only thing that I could see like recurring over almost every story was a white kimono and dark black hair, and then this whitish pale appearance. That's all I could really gather from it, so I wanted to go extra creepy on this one. I wanted to actually work on creating some creepy expressions because I love horror, so I wanted to practice that a little bit. And I wanted to do that by giving her long, straggly hair. I wanted to give her kind of like a pose that looks creepy when she's hiding in the distance. And then I also took heavy inspiration from one of my absolute favorite manga artists of all time, Junji Ito. You've probably heard of him if you've heard of horror writing in comics. But yeah, his artwork is just so beautiful. Or well, it's beautiful, but at the same time terrifying and gross. So I took some inspiration from some of those facial expressions in his comics to actually create her creepy, dark, hollow face. And I think it added up pretty well. I think it also looks pretty cool this way that the tree is sort of standing in the distance, like it's not a close-up. So it's not like she's right in front of you. It's kind of like you are actually walking through a blizzarded cold landscape, and then you see a dead tree, and then you just notice her peeking out from behind the tree with all this mist behind her. And that could make for like a really creepy moment. So you could almost say this is like a POV shot of someone finding the Yuki Onna. Next up, we got an apparently very legendary monster that I haven't heard of before, because the Yamata no Orochi, which is an 8-headed serpent with 8 tails, is a legendary creature that predates back to prehistory. Now obviously, since the tale of this creature has existed for so long, the appearance of this one is also unclear as well. But they say that the creature has got a red belly and red eyes, 8 heads and 8 tails, and that seems to be like the most consistent theme of it, so that's sort of what I decided to go with. And on top of that, I also decided to take huge inspiration from a Japanese game designer of mine, which I like a lot, which is Miyazaki, who created and came up with the ideas for games like Bloodborne and Dark Souls. And in Bloodborne, there's these creatures like the snake bundles. They're kind of like snakes all intertwined with each other. So I took inspiration from that to create this creature. But apparently the story itself about a Yamata no Orochi is actually pretty funny, because it reminds me a lot of Western, or not Western, Nordic mythology, because the story is that this gigantic beast, which apparently is like mountains tall and many hills wide, so wide that it has trees growing on its back in some descriptions. I didn't draw those, but just imagine it has. But this creature was slain by the thunder god, or the storm god, whose name is Susanoo, apparently. Which, if you know Nordic mythology, sounds very familiar to the story about Thor killing Jormungandr, or Mlugoswam as we call it in Danish. Except, this guy was a baller. He did it quite a different way, and he was way more badass for doing so. But basically the story goes that he made a couple build 8 gigantic gates with gigantic barrels filled with a gigantic amount of extremely powerful sake. And then they got basically Yamata to drink the extremely strong sake, and then he just killed it, because it was so freaking wasted that it couldn't fight. Really just finish off this legendary creature with style. Just pull him to the bar, get him wasted, and then just take him out while he's weak. That is, that is one way to do it, I guess. And as our final yokai on this short list, sorry I didn't have time to draw any more of them, so hopefully this last one will be to your satisfaction, but in my opinion, this is also the creepiest one, because it's also the most mysterious one. This creature is called the Umibosu, or bald monk creature, which it doesn't sound very intimidating, but from some of the wooden artwork that has been created that depicts this picture back in ancient times, look pretty freaking terrifying. Basically, the Umibosu is a yokai that lives in the sea, and it's a gigantic creature, and from what we know from the different descriptions, some have called it a gigantic kind of weird octopus-looking animal, which I think is less scary. There's even some old depictions of it, if I remember to put it up. Some have described it as a bald monk just kind of rising out of the sea, which, I mean, I don't know if that would be terrifying as much as it would just be freaking weird, just have freaking Buddha come out of the sea out of nowhere. But the most quote-unquote commonly accepted depiction of these things is just gigantic men, like gigantic black silhouettes rising out of the sea and staring at you while the entire sea turns your ship over and destroys you. And I mean, there's just something so terrifying about the mystery in this to me, because the stories don't really say much except the fact that they will drown you somehow. There's also some depictions that kind of humanize them a bit in stories, talking about how the Umibosu will ask for a barrel, and then if you give them the barrel, it will proceed to shovel water into your boat until it just sinks, and the only way to trick it is like by giving him like a bottomless barrel, I guess. But I don't know if it's just me, but I find the whole mystery about this thing much more terrifying. Just having it as this gigantic looming force rise out of the ocean as it just watches you slowly die and sink and drown. I think that's much more Lovecraftian. I like the mystery behind it, and I think that makes it so much more creepy. And it also, I think, just visually reminds me, that's why I'm saying it might just be me, because this reminds me a lot of a creature I saw in an European show called The Moomin Trolls. Where there's this creature called the Grok, and I thought it was freaking terrifying because it's just this black silhouette and it appears out of nowhere. We don't really have any explanation for it, but it's just staring at you, and that alone just makes it terrifying. It doesn't really do anything, it's just, its presence is just terrifying, just due to the pure confusion of it. And that's why I think this creature, the Umibosu, is in my opinion the most creepy of Japanese yokai. Except the spider lady. but I've already drawn her. I drew her in the previous one, so I can't draw that one. But anyways, that's all the time that I've got for this one. That's all the time I got for this episode. I'm sorry I didn't have time to draw more drawings. I would usually like to be more prepared than this, but I think 3 is just gonna have to do due to the fact that I'm also recording and uploading like on a daily schedule. It's hard to keep up with more than 3 drawings per speed drawing video, I guess. Hopefully the format itself didn't feel too foreign or feel too weird. I'm trying to kind of move away from gaming stuff, not because I dislike gaming stuff, but also just because I want to expand my scope and be able to draw other things than just specifically gaming related. So I can go and draw some more weirdly creative stuff, some stuff that I'm also nichely like intrigued by, like monsters and creepy stuff. I want to draw more, just everything. I want to expand the channel to become more of a general art channel instead of just being a gaming only art channel, I guess. But we're still in the experimental phase, so we'll see how it goes. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening to me rant about Japanese culture and Japanese yokai. I know that can be kind of tiresome, but I want to thank you nonetheless. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.